Okay. What's your name?
Alessandra.
Alessandra.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So she's working with us in our region from the BOC Field School.
Okay.
Yep, just so you know. Okay, so I just wanted to basically know more about this organization and how it contributes, and then I wanted to ask you about evictions and foreclosures because last week he was like throwing knowledge bombs out there.
Okay.
Um, so first, can you explain the organization, Washington Park Partners, and your position within the organization?
Okay. Washington Park Partners is a program of the United Methodist Children's Services. And United Methodist Children's Services has been in this area since approximately 1991. And since 1991 to present date, they have an investment of roughly $20 million into the Washington Park community. And that's inclusive of 70 housing units. We own the building that we're currently in, and it's connected to an older building, which was the first purchase of United Methodist Children's Services. Then on the next block on 38th Street, we have another building erected from the ground up, so new construction, both buildings. And in the surrounding neighborhoods, we have duplex units on 39th and 38th Street, and those are totally new construction as well. So since 1991 to present date, United Methodist Children's Service has become what's called a convening agency, meaning kind of like an anchor institute for a community. And one of the services that United Methodist Children's offer is we have a clothing bank for people to come every Wednesday in the neighborhood that stay in the 53208 zip code and part of the 53210 to come over and get clothing that they may need. And we also have a food pantry and the same qualifications, be a resident of the 53208 and part of the 53210 zip code. But for the food pantry, you only could come once every 30-day cycle. So it's not meant for someone to come every week or, or every day. It's just meant to help you along during the month. And then they have, during holiday seasons, they have special baskets, food baskets that they provide to people as well as their monthly stipend of food if they decide to come every month. So that's part of what United Methodist Children's Services does in the area. And again, I'm part of Washington Park Partners, and that's a program under United Methodist Children's Services. And that came to be back in 2010. The community had a meeting, and it was sort of like, where do we want to go from here? We're seeing some new investments happen in the community. People are taking an interest in the Washington Park area. Now, what do we do? Where do we go? There's also an area that has had two brand new schools built. And when I say brand new, one was built in 2000, which was Ralph Metcalf, that's located on 3400 West North Avenue, because North Avenue is technically part of the Washington Park area. It goes to Monarchy. And something else I think I should clarify. What is the Washington Park boundaries? Just for argument's sake, we go to 51st Street on Lisbon, and from Lisbon and 51st over to Monarchy and 51st and down, and we bordered on the north on the north end. We're bordered by Monarchy. On the east end, we're bordered by 31st Street. On the south end, we're bordered by Valete Street, and on the west end, it takes some funny curves, so we go from 47 to 51st back down to 47. So it's a jagged edge, almost like an election map, So those are the boundaries of the Washington Park community. And the second school that we have is the Mary Bethune Academy, that's located on the corner of 35th Street and Galena, and it was built in 2005. So that gives some backdrop of you have some development going on in the Washington Park area. So this brings us up to 2010. Around 2006 to 8, we had the real estate bubble burst, And Washington Park was an area that was kind of devastated by blight properties, landlords leaving properties, banks foreclosing on properties, refusing to take ownership of the properties after they foreclosed on them. So we had a lot of property that set blight. And that's, if you live in the community and you're seeing abandoned houses, boarded up houses, broken out windows, just doesn't give you a good feeling of a place that I want to be. It doesn't make it seem like it's inspiring. Make it start to look condemned, and it becomes a rest haven for bad activities and nuisance properties and nuisance activities. And Washington Park was going along those lines, but there were some investments here. So people took notice and said, "Well, what do you guys want?" And through surveying, through community partners such as Amaranth, the owner of Amaranth Restaurant, Urban Ecology Center, Our Next Generation, the Boys and Girls Club, a whole bevy of community partners, community residents, and other stakeholders within the community, such as landlords and people that really just was long-term tenants and people that own property and lived in a property here, came together and said, well, we want what's called a sustainable community plan. And from that birthed the Washington Park NID. And the Washington Park NID is, Washington Park was designated by the city of Milwaukee to be a neighborhood improvement district. And what that means is that every property that's in the Washington Park area would be assessed a special tax. If it was a single family house, that tax would be $50. If it was a multiple unit house, multiple unit property, that would be $100. If it was a commercial property, that would be between $150 and $200. Some kind of breakdown like that, and that'd be assessed on a property tax. So that money would be collected by the city, and then it would be distributed through the NID board to Washington Park partners to operate a sustainable community plan. After months of meeting, well, more than a year of meeting, it came up with 7 committees to do things within the community, and these things had action items. The 7 committees was the no, that's okay. Just want to make sure. Okay, the 7 committees was the arts, jobs and business, health and wellness, community education. There's always 2 that just get me stumped. I just can't remember them. Oh, parks and culture, and what's the last one? Health and wellness, housing. Those were the 7 committees that was developed. And from that, the breakdown of the plan was to, well, first, what normally happens is how much comes through the NID is justified through some houses are shut down or tore down, other new properties are built. We have anywhere between $120,000 and $140,000 a year that goes through the NID board to be allocated to how we improve our neighborhood. And through the voting, some of the breakdown is that for strong homes, 50% of the proceeds, close to about $60,000 or more, would be used to create a grant that's used to help homeowners maintain their properties for home improvements. And that's good because people that's here, you want to help them maintain their properties. One of the things that we were finding, and still to this day, but is getting less, is that people don't have the means to fix up the homes that they own, and they didn't have the resources. Well, we started to get the word out through the city and through our connections going out into the community that, hey, we have some resources to help you. So every year, between 10 and 15 homes get repaired using the Washington Park NID. Strong jobs. It's the NID will require that 50% of the workforce that makes the improvements in the neighborhood is done by people that live in the neighborhood. So that means that we were looking for contractors, we were looking for business owners that whatever business you have in that's housed in the Washington Park area, we would like to see how we could work with you to better improve our community. So those were the two things and the two main things that the money would be used for. And then building a strong community. That's why I come in at. It was decided that we needed a community organizer, and this community organizer would be sponsored by the city but housed in Washington Park, and it'd be paid by CDBG funds, Community Block Development Grant funds. So that's how the community organizers, such as myself, come in and fit into this picture. On our team, the Washington Park Partners team, we have a director, we have a program director, we have a housing coordinator, we have a grants coordinator, and we have a community organizer. I go out, talk to people, take the pulse of what people need, what some of their wants are, what some of the main complaints are, and I come back and I help articulate the arguments that community residents have and try to get them in touch or in contact with the people that they're making a complaint with or try to solve the issue. Now, all the time, we're not going to come up with a perfect resolution where you got what you wanted. Sometimes that does happen. But what I found out is that the most thing that people want is to be heard and listened to. If you make a call to the police department and it's never answered or no one ever comes out, that's a problem. So what I do is I take the date and the time that they call. We talk with the police department, the 3rd District. We have a special relationship with them and figure out if we can find a CAD for that call and figure out what happened. If that's possible, we do it. If that's not possible, we have the police re-interview the resident or actually interview the resident for the first time to take their complaint and get their complaint noted. And a lot of times that make people feel good because they didn't fall between the cracks. And one of the things that Washington Park Partners does great is we don't allow people to fall between the cracks. If you got a complaint, argument, you bring it to us. We try to get you the answers that you need. Now, we're not always saying that everything will come out in your favor, but we will get you in front of an audience to discuss your situation. So that's a little bit about United Methodist Children's Services, about the committees, and that's ran under the Sustainable Communities Act that's implemented by the Washington Park Partners. Okay. So that's that. You guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me and I can talk about it. One of the unique things we found out about our community is that we had over 70 resident artists that live within the area, people that do art. We didn't know that until we went out into the communities asking people what they like to do. And turns out our arts and craft community was large. So we have what's called a arts festival every year. This year is going to be August 12th from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. And it's a chance for the artists to come out and do their thing, sell their craft or whatever.
That's really cool. Yeah. So you talked about how partners came together and decided that there needed to be a plan. Can you explain kind of how you initiated that? Like, what was the process? Did you send out grants or to get funding for this plan?
Well, again, this plan came together, and it was before I got here, but the plan came together by stakeholders, community residents, and UMCS asking community residents, what do we need? What do we want? How do we want this to look? Since that time, since that plan was established in 2010, we've had Habitat for Humanity come over and build exclusively in the Washington Park area for 5 years. They have another year and a half left, and they really don't want to leave our community, and we don't want them to leave our community. But we understand that they have to maybe spread out a little bit. But they have, if I'm not mistaken, they're going to be on their either 20th or 30th build in the Washington Park neighborhood. So that's 30 new families within that amount of time. and that's adding to the value of the Washington Park community by A, creating homeowners, B, these homeowners paying a tax, and that tax goes back, a portion of those taxes go back through the NID. And we have an opportunity there to build connections with the new homeowners, and that's good for both sides. So the new homeowners don't feel like they're in the community by themselves, and we there to help them, and we don't have people just popping up in the community and feel disconnected. So that's a win-win situation having Habitat. Lisbon Avenue Health Clinic. That's a $5 million investment in a new building that was erected, I think in 2013. So those type of developments are happening along in the Washington Park area, different small parts, and that's largely because investment kind of draws investment. So if people are doing something in that area, people tend to want to congregate and get in on a part of that. We have support from our local politicians. Former county supervisor Weddle, he was working with Washington Park Partners, and we were able to secure over $600,000 to redo the band shell and close to $200,000 to redo the baseball fields in Washington Park, because you start to see the new development going on around Washington Park. That's a nice entryway and have a nice feel for people to see. Plus, it brings kids out and families out in the summertime to watch a baseball game. So that's a plan that has been funded, and the work has not started yet. The work is slated to start in late September, early October with the band shell. Then it's going to filter across. The Urban Ecology Center is going to erect a new building, partly why they want to stay in Washington Park and build that building is because they see that their partners are doing things and building things in the area, and that is also an anchor institute for the Washington Park itself. That allow families to come over, borrow fishing equipment to go out fishing. You can borrow a canoe, go out on a canoe as long as you have on your safety jacket. Bikes, you can get a membership, $40 a year for a family, and you can go every day and get a bike and ride through the park. It's an awesome resource to have, and with the new facility that they're going to erect, there's going to be way more things to do and a bigger value for the Washington Park community. So development breeds development and investments, and we're starting to see some of that in the Washington Park area. We're starting to actually see a lot of that.
Okay. So in a previous interview with the field school, you mentioned bringing the resources to people and then connecting the people to the resources.
Yeah, that's kind of like my mantra, my main job. Connecting the resources to the people and the people to the resources. What happens a lot of times is that you have grants available, opportunities available, monies available for certain projects or certain things. Well, that information doesn't necessarily get to the people that need these things. So as a community organizer, my job is to make sure that the community residents know about resources that our community has to offer that may be able to benefit them or someone they know. What we have found doing that was that, yes, we have people that need these resources, but sometimes the resources is written at a level that the people that need them can't access them. Where the city, the people that's writing the resources really didn't know that. So coming back, getting the feedback from community residents saying that, hey, look, for me, a good example is to get a loan from the city, let's say an emergency loan. An emergency loan says that if you have a water problem, let's say your house trap break and raw sewage is coming up to your basement. It's about $3,000 to $5,000. Your home insurance don't cover it. You ain't got that. The city would give you an emergency loan to do that, providing you have homeowners insurance and your property tax are up to date. Well, one person may have homeowners insurance, but their property taxes is not quite paid. They don't qualify for that loan. Yeah. So in previous years, it was like, well, what happens? What happens? What happens? Nothing, nothing. But as that became more identified that, you know, having insurance in the Washington Park area is tough because you can't get much but Wisconsin insurance plan. And if you had just limited amounts of insurance, well, that only covers certain things. So we kind of figured that that's a problem. We still being redlined and just not knowing it. If you can't get progressive, but you only thing you can get is Wisconsin insurance plan, well, that helped and laws started to come into place. Lawmakers started to say things about that make it easier for companies to insure people living in the Washington Park area as well as the city of Milwaukee, for that fact of matter. But that's an example of getting ground level information that doesn't always make it up to the ivory tower sometimes, you know. And best laid plans, you know, that was written for people to access, sometimes they don't realize that the level that people are really on out here. So having that kind of communication going both ways helps to develop policies and helps identify situations that need attention. So that's, as a community organizer, that's one of my main goals, connecting the resources to the people and the people to the resources. And what gets in that way is the things that has to be discussed.
Okay, so can you explain a little bit about how you reach out to people? Like, what methods do you use? Do you go door to door? Do you have events?
I know we're living in a technology age, but it's two things that reign true: word of mouth and going door to door. So when I go door to door during the times of the year where it's conducive to go door to door. Now I'm not out in rain, I'm not out in extreme heat, and I'm not out in extreme cold. So in Wisconsin, that leaves you with a little window, and that window normally is about. I think I started going out between late April, probably May, till around October. So that's normally my canvassing window. And I try to get out 3 times a week for a period of 2 to 3 hours a period in the different neighborhoods. You know, so I'm not going down one consecutive block coming back. I may be in this area this week, this area the next week, this area, and I mark it down where I've been, and I try to hit areas that I haven't hit. But as one community organizer, there's still a lot. That's still a lot of door to door. So we do send out blast emails. We have committees, community residents join our committees and coming in, joining the committee, going out, spreading the word, forming block clubs, block watches, block clubs, and having informal meetings. Like one of the things that we have is our community resident breakfast. That is a big success because we're not asking them to do anything. We're just cooking them breakfast and coming in and talking with each other. And from conversation, when you get people together, you find out a lot of things. And people hear about, oh, y'all have breakfast that's free in y'all community. It brings in more people. So that word of mouth spreads. So if you do something and you work with someone in the community and you keep your word, I get calls out of the blue all the time. Well, Bobby, somebody gave me your information, told me to call you, and you might can help me with that. Okay, what's your problem? What do you need done? And this is what I can do. And being honest and upfront with people helps a lot. You know, we in Washington Park partners, we don't make a promise, but what we do tell people, we're going to work with you, do our best to try to help you or get you an answer. That's what we can do. And that, keeping our word and getting out in the community, that people see that. They see us coming out there every year. We send out mailings. We do what's called a housing survey, where we go out in the Washington Park area, walk and drive, and notice any house that got something that looks like it's not up to code or just sticks out and don't look right in the community. We'll put that house on the list, and we send the landlords out a letter. And it's a very general letter, letting them know about our services and what we do here at Washington Park Partners. We go back, we do the survey twice a year. The first one is to identify, the second one is to see who've made progress. Now, after you've been contacted and we hadn't heard from you, and we tried again to contact you and we haven't heard from you, we make sure that now that list that we generated goes to the city. Now the city may want to contact you, and the city may contact you because we have a relationship with city officials, to where they may say, with Department of Neighborhood Services, they may say, hey, here's a letter from us, and we're asking you to get in touch with Washington Park Partners. We noticed that you have some infractions in your property, and Washington Park Partner has a NID, and you may qualify for it. It's a general letter that states that. After people don't pay attention to nothing, well, then they get inspection fees, because now the Department of Neighborhood Service say, well, we sent you a letter, and you didn't respond. We sent an inspector out there. They sent you a letter. Then the reinspection fees occur. So doing those things to help us kind of identify who's, look, your house don't have to be perfect, but it shouldn't be obtuse either. And that's the thing, people live in communities. You would like to be able to look to the left of you and to the right of you and feel safe.
So, what is the community like in regards to evictions and or foreclosures?
Foreclosures, as I stated earlier in the interview, it hit the Washington Park neighborhood pretty hard. And we had a lot of blight property that was sitting out. It became situations where people would break into the houses to steal the mechanical parts of it, which made the house, wasn't able to rent it. You can't rent a house without a furnace, or if half the plumbing ripped out of the walls. So some landlords was like, I'm done. I'm not. The city can have it, meaning that they're not going to pay taxes on it. If you don't, the rule was, and it was changed last year because of this, was that if you failed to pay property taxes in 3 consecutive years, that the city of Milwaukee could take your property. Well, the city of Milwaukee was taking 300-400 properties a year since the foreclosures started happening, because landlords was walking away. And you had 2 types of foreclosures. You got the city foreclosure and you got the bank foreclosure. The bank foreclosure tells the tenant or the previous homeowner, you got to leave this property. We're taking it back and we're going to try to sell it and blah, blah. So they get the people out of the property. Now, the property sits. The bank tried to sell it, didn't sell it. No one bought it. As it sat there, it's been vandalized and victimized. And now the bank don't want anything to do with it. Well, now the bank's not paying the property taxes on it. So then the city foreclosed on the property. Now the city has a property that's been victimized and vandalized for the past 3 years that could have been serviceable a lot sooner. The city voted and came up with a new law, voted that houses could be taken after a year, depending on the circumstances. That way it's not sitting there for 3 years, decaying, the roof falling in, and people vandalizing it. And so how that goes with evictions is this. What we see in the Washington Park area, and as well as the city of Milwaukee, we have some bad landlords. If you would visit the Journal Sentinel website, they did a segment on terrible landlords in the city of Milwaukee, maybe about 3 to 4 months ago. And I think of the top 10, I think we have 6 or 7 that own property in the Washington Park neighborhood. That makes it tough because there are properties that have violations written on them, but the owners go through a loophole with the system that allow them to pay something without taking the property from them. Now, all the while, these people are collecting a full month's rent. They may have $10,000 worth of violations, but as long as they're making a payment on a payment plan, they can't take the property. So through these loopholes, you have bad actors continuing to operate as landlords, and they're not there to fix a house. They're not there to get to make sure that a community resident is getting a fair place for a fair amount. They're there to strictly act as pirates to get the money until the person don't pay rent anymore. Once that happens, the the landlord typically, once he can't rent the property anymore, or rented the property up to the last day when the sheriff come and put a you have to be out of here because this house has been seized for the sheriff's sale. So you have that type of thing going on out here. Landlords lose the house, go through foreclosure, don't tell the tenant that, and the tenant just paying their rent. Next thing you know, the tenant get a letter. You got to go. The tenant never seen the letter because the letter never came to the tenant's property. So evictions, foreclosures, it's a cycle, and it's one that you got to figure out where you want to plant your flag and where do you want to stop. You know, you can do it on people buying property. You know, there's several suggestions that if you owe property tax on any property or you have a fine on any property, that you shouldn't be able to buy another property. You know, it's not a law, it's just a suggestion. You know, that may cut some down on the front end. Far as evictions go, you have tenants out here that plays games and don't pay their rent. But that time is kind of caught up with them through technology. It was a time in the 80s where, you know, you moved out of someone's property, you lived out your security, they would live out their security, and then they'd just disappear in the middle of the night. Well, landlord would go in, get the house back ready, and re-rent it, not going through a full eviction. So these bad actors kept getting houses because people don't typically move more than 2-3 miles away, which kind of keeps them in the same area. And if I'm not mistaken, Washington Park is about 5 to 6 miles in a radius. So what you're starting to see now that technology is catching on and landlords are catching on going through full evictions is that people are having a harder time renting houses due to their past. Landlords are now checking your background. They're checking your employment status. They're checking your credit history. Some landlords are going as far as going on Facebook or other type of media outlets to see what kind of profile you got, who are the type of people you're hanging with. And due to that, landlords are really, good landlords are really tightening down who they rent to. So what you have is some properties that don't care who they rent to. Some landlords is just taking the money. You have multiple families living in the same unit, and that's a problem for the whole community. You have a 2 or 3 bedroom unit in the duplex that's really designed for anywhere from 4 to 6 people. Now you have 12 people staying in it. And in Milwaukee, the duplexes typically are a decent size. Living room, dining room, 2 or 3 bedrooms, sometimes a foyer, a basement, an attic. People are literally filling up houses, family members and friends. So that's a problem for the community because now you have overcrowding. You got more cars parking on the street. You got more kids outside in that area. You have way more activity, and a lot of times you're going to find that to be a nuisance property. Don't want to say every time, but a lot of times you're going to find that to be a nuisance property.
Can you kind of explain what that is?
A nuisance property?
Yeah.
A nuisance property is a property where you have community residents complaining about the activity that goes on in it or the people that lives in it. Sometimes activities, it could be people selling drugs. It could be you don't know they're selling drugs, but people going in and out all types of night. People playing loud music or kids that's all on your property and not being properly maintained or monitored. Those become nuisances. And it's really a quality of life issue. If I own my home and I'm staying next door to someone who kids throw garbage out of the window and it blows in my yard, now that's extra on me. Or they steal my garbage cans and put their garbage in it. I mean, these things sound crazy and they sound simple, but months of that happening build tension amongst neighbors. Then before you know it, you have something that was simple go into something that's big. You know, that's that's kind of what we don't want. So we, when we go out, we offer some things as like a hotspot sheet for our community residents, or when we have our safety meetings, come tell us about bad actors in your neighborhood, and let us try to get the CPU team, in the third district working on that. Because one of our partners is Safe and Sound, and Safe and Sound has a community prosecution unit that works in the Washington Park neighborhood as well as other neighborhoods. And what that consists of is an assistant district attorney, a community, I would like to say a community liaison or community rep from Safe and Sound, and police officers from whatever district they're in. And they get these complaints and they actively start an investigation. They look into things and they start an investigation. A lot of times I could give them an address that I got from a community resident, tell them the problem. They say, okay, Bobby, we already got that on our radar. It may be part of an investigation, because a lot of times these are not as isolated as they look. So what we tell community residents, get license plate numbers, get as much information as you can safely. Relay that back to us, especially if you want to stay anonymous, and we will relay that to the CPU team. This house may be involved with a house down on the east side, doing different things, and the police is already on it investigating it. It's just a matter of time before they come in and close down houses, and we had that happen in the Washington Park area a few times. And when that happened, that's good, because it let community residents know that, hey, your complaints didn't go unheard. It just maybe took a minute for the investigation to get what they needed to shut it down properly. And a lot of times you have to let the CPU team will call the landlord right away and let them know, hey, you got activities going on. You need to address that. Sometimes that's enough to squash it. Sometimes it's not, depending on the type of landlord you have. And again, who wants to go through an eviction? The landlord or the tenant? Neither one. From a landlord's perspective, it costs him money up front. And if he goes through this whole eviction, he has to come back down to court a couple times. First, file it, make sure his paperwork is right, then show up at court and hoping that the tenant show up. If the tenant don't show up, then the landlord is automatically granted the eviction. But then the landlord has to put money up to have the moving company come in and move the tenants out. And then the landlord has to go back to court and tell the court the damages to the property that the tenant did. So, honest landlords say they just did this. Some dishonest landlords will say, that's $4,000. It cost me $4,000 to get the house back running. Now that turns into a judgment. Judgment put on your credit report. You can't. It makes it really hard to get something when you have a judgment against you. Then if that person ever came in, why do a landlord do it? If they ever want to get that judgment removed for any reason, they have to pay it. Let's say 10 years down the line. Now this is a different person than it was, the same person, but with a new attitude, moving on with life, and trying to buy a house now. Well, you still got this judgment. You got to pay that. So that's what makes it worth it in the end for a landlord, because you may recoup your damages down the road, or sometimes people just disappear in the night and they never come back up. But that's was something that you had to do to get that person out your property.
So have you witnessed any forms of disinvestment or gentrification throughout the community?
The disinvestment happened happened a long time ago. And that was, I would say that happened in the 80s and 90s, the disinvestment part. I would say and that was a different time in history for the United States. Period. That time represent in most inner cities, you had a crack and cocaine epidemic. So there was diverse disinvestment and white flight out of a lot of communities from the inner city to outward during those times. They, our neighborhoods became crime infested or heavily policed, whichever one you want to use. Those times, is, in my opinion, are kind of in the rearview mirror. What I see in the Washington Park area, and I certainly was here when that was going on, but what I see in the Washington Park area now is more of a mixture of people. I've stated earlier in the interview the investments and the dollars, and now we are seeing more Caucasians and Latinos coming to our area. And when I say our area, I say this area, Washington Park, was about 85% African American and about 10% Asian or Hmong. And the Hmong population in the Washington Park area is steady growing. And now we have Burmese in the area, and that population is growing. And Washington Park looks a lot different than it did 10, 15 years ago. I, as a community organizer, see more Caucasian people catching the bus and actually living in the houses when I knock on the doors than I've ever seen. Is that a good thing? Yes. Is it a bad thing? I don't think so, because I think a diverse community is a strong community, in my opinion. Now, I don't think that people should be priced out of a place to live, but at the same time, there are programs like Axe Housing that works with the city of Milwaukee and works with Washington Park Partners for anyone that wants to buy one of the foreclosed houses that the city took. The city has a plan, a couple programs in which they invest $20,000 up front in the house. You just have to qualify, fit the qualifications, and go through the program. So there are opportunities for people to buy their homes and live in their homes here. Do I think that the price of housing is going to go up? Yes. The real estate market reset. But there was a time where I know you guys can't really, they wouldn't be able to see, but on that block, there was a time where each one of those houses was worth over $65,000, $75,000. And the city was using that as a principle for property tax. That's significant because you look on there now and you go down that block now, the property value for the house from the city of Milwaukee is probably $30,000 to $40,000. And that's a big drop off. And that is going to come back because that simply is the value of the neighborhood. You look at where Washington Park is located, on a bus, you're 15 minutes away from downtown. In a car, you're 7 minutes away. Our downtown area has, I think, between 2015, 16, and 17, upwards of $3 billion worth of investment. You know, just between Northwest Mutual, the Bradley Center, and what's getting ready to happen to the Grand Avenue Mall. And if you know anything about the city of Milwaukee, if you look along the Milwaukee River, all the development and the condos that was built up in that area, again, if you look 15 years ago, none of that was there. It was old tannery factories. So that property value is shooting up. It's not unreasonable to think that 7 minutes up the road, that property value is going to go back up. And again, one of the things too about the Washington Park neighborhood, we kind of bound by two other neighborhoods that's a little bit more stable and viewed a lot better than the Washington Park neighborhood. That's Washington Heights, that borders us to the west, and to the south, Martin Drive.
Do you know any chance the demographics of those areas?
I don't know the full demographics of those areas, but I can tell you that Martin Drive northern border is Valit Street. We border with them on Valit. We got Valit North. They have everything Valit South. They go Valit South. Washington Heights was the old 41, which is now Highway 175. They got that, which starts around 46 or 47, back up to Wauwatosa border. And that again goes from Valit, and that goes over to, I would like to say North Avenue, and then go up. But I'm not 100% on their boundaries, but those are really nice areas.
So, you mentioned downtown, the property value going up. What do you think some of the restrictions on Washington Park is in regards to why it's such a difference in the property value? Like, some of the research that I've done talked about how a lot of limitations were placed on people who have felonies or evictions, and a lot of people do, so.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you ask the question like that, you have to say, well, what do you say your undesirables? Back to where they come from, in most cases. If a person went to jail 15 years ago, they spent 15 years in jail, and they getting released, are they going to send them to Green Bay? Are they going to send them to Racine? No, chances is you're going to be on probation or parole, and you're going to go back to the neighborhood from which you come. And a lot of cases, that's a lot of the inner cities in the city of Milwaukee. That in itself will limit the property value, because one thing, and just to amplify that a little bit more, if you go on a city map and you look for everybody that's you want to know the areas where people have sexual offenses or predators, you have to report to the sexual registry. Washington Park has a significant amount of. Doesn't mean that they was here or committed the crime here, but this is where they are. If you're going to go into a city that you've never been before, and you looked on a map and you wanted to move in the best areas for the city, and you go through the crime data and you say, well, sexual offenses or sexual offenders, where are those guys? You know, people that have to, what are the sexual people that have to be on a sexual registry? Where do they live at? You'll see a significant amount in Washington Park area, but in most of the inner city parts of Milwaukee. So that in itself will keep some property down until those things start to clear out. Certain house, and then housing stock. We have an older housing stock. It's unique, it's beautiful, but it is older. So that in itself will keep the property value down. You don't have a bunch of houses that's brand new construction. In the United States, I think it was oh man, I don't want to be quoted on this, but there's a law about lead when you sell a property. Do you know if any lead is in the house? And they got a spot where you can say you don't know. Well, we know that the use of lead wasn't outlawed in the United States until sometime in the late 60s, early 70s. If your house was built before that, your house has lead in it. Does that sound attractive?
Yeah, I was reading about that in research too, and it was saying it was something about how landlords, even if they do know, as long as they're upfront about it to the tenant, then it's perfectly fine.
Well, that's if a tenant asks.
Yeah.
And here's one thing that you might want to look at with evictions, is how many tenants actually have a copy of their lease. How many tenants actually read the lease?
Yeah. So.
Because what I found just doing my job, and I was a landlord for 18 years. I've owned 4 duplexes. I've owned a small business, a liquor store. So I have some of this knowledge firsthand of things. And again, being in the Washington Park area since 1979. You know, so I've been a community. I'm a resident of the community, and I still am a resident of the community. I've been a stakeholder in the community. I'm still a stakeholder in the community. Own a house here, and I've been a businessman, a business owner, and there are some things that people can take advantage of, and that's the way the laws are written. You know, if you rent out a property to someone and you saying that you're going to be on, a lease, well, a lease is not even the mandatory thing. There are certain things it's called month-to-month rent. That's still that's still favorable. A lot of tenants want month-to-month renting. Now, some paper to say it's some paperwork that they can sign to say that this is a month-to-month thing, and as a landlord, you want that to happen, so that when you go to court, you can say, "Hey, this is a month-to-month basis." And you also want them to sign a year lease to say that if they break their lease, they owe you. But as a tenant doesn't, most tenants don't read the lease, but if they would take time to read it, they would see the power that they have as well.
Yeah, I did know about that because of research. But then it also said that if the tenants if they like owe back rent, then the rights that they have kind of are like they don't exist anymore.
Well, see, if when they sign the lease, what should happen is that you sign two identical leases. One goes to the landlord, one goes to you, and it has both you guys' signature on it. That should happen the day you take the keys. The day you give them the money and take the keys should be the same day. But sometimes you don't have that operating on the same day. Sometimes a person that come and they'll sign the lease, they'll sign it, but they ain't got the keys yet. They get the keys a couple days later or something. You're supposed to go through this house before you sign the lease and let them know everything that's wrong with it or that you didn't do. Because once you sign that lease and you take the keys, you've assumed responsibility. So for all that landlord knows, you did it next month. Because he's not going to remember the month that he rented it to you. But next month, you did that. Your kids did that.
Interesting. So that was pretty much all of the questions that I had. So my research is based on evictions, and I'm trying to correlate that to architecture and communities.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any just information that you think I should know?
I do. And this is just my personal belief from living in the community, being in the community, and being a landlord. One of the main reasons I like Habitat for Humanity is that they take a big jalopy, and I call it a jalopy, because all old properties don't have an intrinsic value. People fall in love with some of the old construction, but you have mold, you have vents from forced air that probably never been swept or cleaned. All summer long, they collected more and more dust. As soon as the first cold day come, people fire it up, that goes into the air and kids get it, and asthma starts to develop. Because we have years of dust going into the ventilation. We're talking about houses that was built anywhere between 1913 and 1936, 1940. That's a lot of time. Ask a question. How many times have you had your vents swept? The window sills from going up and down. That's where the greatest concentration amount of lead is in the window sills and right below the window apron. So in the summertime, the windows are up because most of them don't have central air, and the kids are playing around the window, and guess what's sitting in the window? The fan, blowing all that dust up. It's a health thing. The health department know this. That's why the health department receive grants and will give landlords, I think it's $200, $160 a window to take out the old windows and put in the new vinyl windows. A lot of landlords don't want to take advantage of that because you open your door to the city, you may be opening your door to some problems if you're not on top of it. So they rather continue to function the way they do than to let the city in and and the city cat has to come in and do an inspection for that to happen. But it's a program, and it's meant to get the lead out of the houses. They know this because they check the level of kids through I think it's WIC, up to age 2 or 3. And they able to identify kids that have a high lead content in the areas that they've lived in the houses the exact houses that they lived in. So this stuff I'm telling you about that in the asthma, the health department has that kind of data. I love Habitat for the fact that at the very minimum, they're going to turn a duplex into a single family house. They're going to gut it down to the rafters, and everything going back in it is going to be new. From insulation that was used that could have been asbestos laden. We're talking about construction materials that was made again between 1913 and 1940s. We finding out nowadays that a lot of that stuff caused cancer. You just don't know. So, in my opinion, anytime we could take down an old duplex and build a quality single family unit, not a duplex, because again, you get to the overcrowding part with a duplex. On some of our blocks in the Washington Park area, and it's like this kind of throughout most of the inner city parts of Milwaukee, whether it's south side or north side, it's not uncommon to have 15 duplexes on this block, on this side of the block, 15 duplexes on this side of the street. Well, that's 60 families. Each probably had two kids in it apiece or so. You can literally have a gang of 120 on the block, and that's from every kid that live on the block. Houses are too close, too congested, too many people on top of each other. So I like when the house go down or 2-3 houses go down. There's no need for that type of congestion and people being on top of people. With poverty and frustration of things that's happening, that's the breeding grounds for something bad. Now, they've done this study in rats. When you cramp rats together, they turn violent against each other. So why are we continuously doing it with humans? Yeah. So if I'm doing architecture and I'm looking at a city plan or looking to plan a community or something, I want as minimum amount of multiple family living units as possible. And even with the ones I know that has to be there, give them space and amenities. I mean, we literally, look at that picture there. You couldn't get 7 feet between those two duplexes right there. And that's Milwaukee. That's the way we were built. For the times, it was great, but it's almost 100 years later. In some cases, 100 years later. Some of those houses should come down. New construction should go up, where kids had an opportunity to live in an environment that's lead-free, asbestos-free, and mold-free. You know? So that's what I would say. Thin it out. I love going down blocks where houses is missing and fields are there and fields are maintained and just not so close to each other. You know? So that's what my advice would be. Just look at some of the health benefits of new construction, some of the health deterrents of older construction. Thinning out the block, crowd control.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of my take on that part. Did that answer your last question?
Yeah, I really did.
Okay. Feel free to ask me about anything else around the Washington Park area. I give you my disclosure about it, and then I'll talk about it.
Yeah, that's all I got so far.
Yeah.
But would you mind doing a follow-up interview if needed?
Nah, I don't mind.
Okay, so
I'm
I'll
good.
contact you if I need
Okay.
some more information.
Okay.
Thanks.
You are most welcome.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Well,
Be
first,
quiet over there.
yeah, I'm a note taker today. Well, first, could you state that you read through the consent form and that you agree?
Policy person.
Yeah.
Yes, I read the consent form and I signed it. And I gave the views and opinion of Bobby McQuay, a community organizer in the Washington Park neighborhood.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I was wondering what your definition of a sustainable community is.
Good question. My definition of a sustainable community is a community that's almost self-sufficient, meaning that if I had to go to the grocery store, that there's a grocery store that could provide all the needs for the community there. We live in somewhat of a food desert from time to time. So if I wanted to go to a movie theater, I don't necessarily have to leave my community. But if you look at Milwaukee, to go to a movie theater, you got to leave the city of Milwaukee.
Yeah, I noticed that when I moved here.
Yeah, I mean, you go,
20-minute drive.
yeah, you go down to Bayshore, but Bayshore is not in Milwaukee. That's Greendale. You go out to what's that? The Marquise.
Marcus,
It's out there. It's in
Marcus
Waukesha.
Amphitheater?
No.
Oh.
Now the amphitheater, you can go downtown and see that. That's in Milwaukee. But if you want to see action movie, you're gonna leave the boundaries of the city of Milwaukee. Oh, okay. Except for one, there's a Marcus that's right off of Oklahoma, at 27.
On the south side.
Yeah, on the south side. That's it.
I think it's Southgate. Or
Right,
yeah.
Southgate.
Yeah.
That's the only one left in Milwaukee. Where it didn't used to be that way. The old Capitol Court had Capitol Court Theater. You had Northridge, you had Northtown, you had the theater on Mill Road. But if I stay in the Washington Park area, I got to leave. The closest one to me would be Southgate, which is a journey to get to.
Yeah.
A sustainable community is in my opinion, is a community that you can live, work, and play in.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Also, what does community engagement mean to you?
Community engagement mean addressing people at their level. You know, wherever they at, whether it be that they work in a corner store, own a corner store, living in a duplex, living in a single family, going to the schools that's located in the Washington Park area. Community engagement to me is just engaging people and residents that's in the community doing something, living, working, and playing. Because you answer you get a variety of answers. Why you here? You know, why you at this school or why you at this store? Man, I live over here, or I grew up over here. You know, or I had to come over here because they didn't have it over there. You know, answers again, questions, answers. What you do with the information is what you do with the information, but you ask the question. And community engagement is simply just asking the questions, the basic questions. What do you want? What do you need? What do you see?
Thank you. I can see that you do a lot of work in the community through your job. So why do you do the work you do?
That's a good one too. I guess the easiest way to put it is that, you know, I would like for everybody to have an equal shot of be happy. You know, I've learned some things and I've accomplished some things, and that's good for me. But I feel better when everybody accomplishes something or everybody knows something. It's nothing that I think is so special about me that somebody else can't do. You know, I don't like to see mothers that's single put out their house. I want to show them how you could go to court and how you can articulate your argument. I don't like to see fathers that's so depressed because they don't have an opportunity for work. I want to show them how there's programs out here and how to access them. And also, you know, a lot of the things that we do is because of personal decisions we made. I like to help people identify that you got to be the best you can be. And everything starts with you. And the one thing that we all share is community. I got kids, I got family members. Well, it doesn't serve me any good to just live in my castle or have my head down because my kids go to the store. What if somebody shoot my kid? Rob my kid? Could have been an opportunity that I had to maybe help that person and didn't even know. Just walk right past them, you know. So I work in the community because it's a place where I live. And dang, I wanted to cuss, but I didn't. I held that back. But you know, I just want to be able to lay my head down safely and be able to know at the end of the day that I tried to make a difference and help people help themselves. You know, so that's why I do the work, and that's why, you know, I still stay in this community. I could probably have, well, I know I could have moved away from the inner city a long time ago. But that wasn't my goal. It just never has been. I graduated from Washington High School. Got my first degree from MATC. Working on my next one from UWM. And it's just, you know, last time I moved from a community, I moved from Gary, Indiana to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I did that kicking and screaming. You know, so, you know, this is where I plant my flag at. And I just want to see people have an opportunity. That's it.
Yeah. All that you said was very admirable. I really appreciate all the work that you do for the community.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My last question is, what is your dream for this community?
That's the one right there. I would really like to see the Washington Park community self-sufficient. And again, that goes back to my definition of self-sufficient, a place that you could live in, play in, work in, and decent place to raise a family. That's my vision for Washington Park.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
You are welcome. So, how did you guys get here? Y'all drove?
Yeah,
On the car?
we drove us.
Okay. It makes them feel some kind of way that you're cleaning up. Even some crazy stuff like picking up on somebody else's property make them feel some kind of way. They're like, hey, you ain't got to do my work.
Yeah.
You know, that's just playing on people. You know,
Yeah.
so that's the idea behind the block cleanups. You know, are you really so bad that other people have to come and clean up your block? It's almost like a shaming thing.
Yeah, it is.
And until people will come out and start doing something, you know. And then too, you know, a key to community is communicating with the kids.
Yeah,
If you could get a bead on the kids would just about come out and help do almost anything.
Yeah, we interviewed Angela
Pruitt.
Pruitt.
Yeah, she's big in the
And
community.
She's big in the community and also big on reaching on kids.
Yes, she
and
is.
helping them help out because they're the future of this community.
Right, and
So,
we working on a project. Rosalind Cox, she works here. She's a homeowner, retired Navy person, retired from something else. You know, so she's got a collected background, but she also has a community. One of the supporters of Community Garden on 35th and Galena, and I'm working with her. We are working together to try to get a grant to make that area a little bit safer, a little bit better for people working in the garden, and for kids to actually have something to come over there and play in. So we kind of going to try to make it a quasi pocket park community garden situation. You know, where we can control the flow of traffic in and out. You know, those kind of things to help capture the youth and say, hey, look, you don't want to, you know, this is where y'all play at, man. You don't want all that paper over here. You know, or before we go over there, let's go clean this up. Kids they do that. They just really want some interaction, some involvement. Yeah.
awesome.
No problem.
All right, thanks again.
All right.